The Council's desperation reached its peak. They had underestimated humanity's resilience and tactical brilliance. Now, the galaxy was on the edge of a full-scale war. The once dominant empire, whose leaders had ridiculed Earth's people, now found themselves scrambling to fight a foe they could not predict, one they had believed was no longer a threat. With the sudden surge of human power in the galaxy, the Council's leaders called for an emergency summit. They were forced to reconsider their approach. For the first time in years, the Council agreed on one thing: humanity had to be crushed before they could grow stronger. No more negotiations, no more half measures. Humanity's rebellion had to be snuffed out, and the full force of the Council would be unleashed. A fleet of dreadnoughts, destroyers, and elite battlecruisers was assembled in the heart of the galaxy. The plan was to make a devastating strike against the human forces. Their objective was clear: eradicate the exiled humans once and for all, and reclaim control over the galaxy. The Council's finest warriors, the military's elite, were sent to put an end to the human menace. But what the Council didn't know was that humanity had already anticipated their response. The humans had been watching, studying every move the Council made, and they knew the fleet was coming. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, where Council ships had once felt secure, the humans prepared for their greatest ambush yet. The fleet arrived in the Zeta system first, the flagship of the Council's forces lighting up with intimidating energy. Signatures. The Council was ready, their ships lined up in perfect formation, anticipating an easy victory. But as they entered the system, they found nothing. No sign of the humans, no hint of the enemy. It was a trap. The human forces, far smaller, in number, had set their ambush with the kind of precision that only years of exiled planning could achieve. Hidden mines, cloaked ships, and advanced weaponry lay in wait, ready to pounce. As soon as the Council's fleet crossed the point of no return, humanity struck. The first shot came from a hidden human ship, its energy cannons firing with deadly precision. The flagship of the Council fleet was the first to fall, its shields collapsing instantly as the human weapon tore through it. The destruction sent shockwaves throughout the entire fleet, throwing their formation into chaos. The humans didn't just attack, they annihilated. More human ships emerged from their hiding spots, appearing out of nowhere like shadows. The Council's elite forces scrambled to respond, but they were outmatched. Humanity had learned from the best, and now they were using everything in their arsenal to crush the enemy. The battle raged through space like a storm, with explosions and flashes of light as the two sides collided in a deadly dance. The Council, who had once believed that humanity was a broken species, now realized the terrible truth. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their right to exist. They were fighting with a fury and determination that no one had ever seen before. It was the same spirit that had carried them through countless wars, on Earth, now unleashed on a galactic scale. As the battle continued, it became clear that the humans were not just a threat, they were a force of nature. The Council's once proud fleet, built over centuries of dominance, was being torn apart, piece by piece. Each ship they lost was a symbol of their arrogance and their failure to understand the true power of humanity. In the midst of the chaos, the Council's leadership realized the situation had spiraled out of control. The full-scale offensive they had planned was falling apart. Their finest warriors, their elite forces, were being outsmarted, outgunned, and outmaneuvered by an enemy they had considered beneath them. But even as the Council began to regroup, the damage had been done. The human rebellion had spread like wildfire, with factions across the galaxy rallying to their cause. The battle for the galaxy was no longer a matter of if it would happen, it was a matter of when. The humans had not only proven they could survive, they had shown the galaxy that they could thrive in the face of adversity. The Council's once iron grip on the galaxy had shattered, and a new era was dawning, one where humanity would play a central role, and the galaxy trembled in anticipation of what was coming next. The battle had raged for weeks. The galaxy, once held in the firm grasp of the Galactic Council, was now a place of chaos and uncertainty. The human forces, having proven their strength in countless skirmishes, were no longer a threat to be underestimated. They were the storm that could no longer be ignored. The once proud council, shattered and on the defensive, found themselves trapped in a war they had never expected to fight. The final confrontation began in the heart of council space. Their capital world, a gleaming jewel of power and culture, stood as the symbol of their dominance. The council had gathered their last reserves, elite warriors, the best of their fleets, and their most advanced technologies. It was all or nothing. If they lost this battle, they would lose everything. Humanity's forces were scattered but relentless. A coalition of rebel factions, old Earth soldiers, and new human alliances had come together under one banner. They were tired of being exiled, tired of being underestimated. Their leadership had grown more unified, their resolve stronger with every victory. This final battle would decide not just their future, but the future of the galaxy. The battle began at dawn, or what passed for dawn on the capital world. The Council's fleet appeared, large and imposing, its ships moving into formation. The human fleet, smaller but faster and filled with the rage of countless generations, moved into position. The space between the two fleets seemed to stretch forever, but there was no turning back now. In the silence of space, the first volley was fired. A single shot, human technology striking out with deadly precision. The Council's flagship, the symbol of their power, exploded into flames, its shields useless against the force of the human weaponry. The human fleet moved in, like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. The Council's ships fired back, but their weapons faltered, ineffective against the human tactics that had been honed in secrecy for years. The battle quickly turned into a massacre. Human ships darted in and out of the fight, taking down larger, slower enemy vessels with ease. The elite warriors of the Council, trained for centuries to dominate the stars, were now caught off guard by the speed and unpredictability of their exiled enemies. No longer were humans the underdogs. They were the ones dictating the pace of the fight, and the Council was powerless to stop them. With every strike, the humans grew bolder. Their ships struck the heart of the Council's defenses, sabotaging key installations and leaving the capital world vulnerable. Soon, the Council's military was in disarray, and their command structure collapsed. Panic spread through the ranks as the once dominant empire realized that their end was inevitable. On the ground, the human resistance took the fight to the capital. As the last of the Council's elite forces retreated to their fortified stronghold, they were met by a determined human force that had come from every corner of the galaxy. The battle for the capital world became a brutal fight for survival, but humanity had one advantage the Council never saw coming: unity. The human soldiers fought with the fury of those who had been pushed to the edge for too long. Every strike, every step, was a declaration that they would no longer be silenced, no longer be treated as lesser beings. With each victory on the battlefield, humanity carved out their place in the galaxy, not as exiles, but as conquerors. At the heart of the capital, the final confrontation took place. The last remnants of the Council's leadership stood against the human forces, desperately trying to make a last stand. But it was futile. The humans were too many, too organized, and too determined. As the final blow was struck, the Council's reign crumbled, their power fading into nothingness. Humanity had not only survived their exile, they had triumphed. The galaxy, once a place where they were cast out and ridiculed, was now under their influence. The Council's power was no more, and the human legacy was etched into the stars. As the last of the Council's ships burned in space, the humans stood victorious. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a new power, one forged in the fires of exile, one that would no longer be ignored. Humanity was no longer just a people. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their fury had reshaped the galaxy forever. And as the galaxy looked on, they realized one undeniable truth: humanity was unstoppable. Their legacy, forged in the fires of war and exile, would last for generations to come. The Council's confidence began to waver as the whispers spread. It started with subtle anomalies, unexplained power fluctuations, encrypted messages intercepted on secure channels, and strange occurrences in systems previously thought secure. These were dismissed as glitches, mere coincidences in the vast expanse of space. But the whispers persisted. A rogue alien smuggler, known for his connections and information network, was one of the first to notice the pattern. Operating in the fringes of Council space, he had access to information that others did not. Through his network, he began to hear rumors of human activity, covert operations, mysterious disappearances, and sightings of ships that should not exist. Intrigued and cautious, he began his own investigation. What he uncovered was both astonishing and terrifying. Humanity, exiled and presumed defeated, had not only survived but had adapted and evolved in ways the galaxy could not have anticipated. They had infiltrated Council systems, planted seeds of disruption, and were now operating from the shadows, orchestrating a campaign of subtle retaliation. The whispers grew louder, reaching the ears of Council officials and military leaders. Panic began to spread as more incidents occurred. A research station in the Zeta system experienced a sudden and unexplained loss of data, erasing years of research in an instant. A military outpost in the Theta sector found its defense systems compromised, leaving it vulnerable to potential threats. A diplomatic envoy in the Lambda Quadrant received a cryptic message: "The fire spreads where you least expect it." These incidents, though seemingly isolated, were part of a larger, coordinated effort. The exiled humans had not given up. They had merely changed their tactics. Instead of open confrontation, they were employing subversive methods, hacking into systems, spreading misinformation, and causing chaos from within. The Council, once united in their decision to exile humanity, now found themselves divided. Some leaders called for a full-scale military response, while others advocated for negotiation and diplomacy. But the damage had already been done. The galaxy was no longer a place of peace and order. It was a realm of uncertainty and fear. The whispers continued to spread. The Council realized that they had underestimated humanity. They had thought that by banishing Earth, they had rid themselves of a threat. Instead, they had awakened a force more dangerous than they could have imagined. The whispers were not just rumors. They were a warning, and the galaxy was listening. The whispers had become roars. Across the galaxy, the Council's grip was slipping. What they had thought to be a minor nuisance had evolved into a full-blown crisis. The damage was no longer confined to isolated incidents. It was everywhere. Systems were failing, ships were disappearing, and entire colonies were losing contact with the Central Command. The galaxy was in turmoil, and the Council was scrambling to restore order. But one thing was certain: the humans were not done. They had been exiled, forgotten, and dismissed as an afterthought. But now they were fighting back, not with brute force, but with cunning and strategy. Their actions had caused a ripple effect, sending shockwaves through Council space. The Council had tried to trace the source of these disturbances, but their attempts were futile. Every time they thought they had cornered the culprits, they vanished into the shadows. The exiled humans had mastered the art of stealth, operating on a scale the Council had not anticipated. What began as simple sabotage had grown into something much more dangerous: a sophisticated campaign to disrupt the very fabric of Council control. The military, once a symbol of the Council's power, was now on the defensive. A fleet that had been dispatched to eliminate the source of these disturbances was ambushed by a group of human ships, appearing out of nowhere, striking quickly and vanishing just as fast. The fleet, caught off guard and outmatched in tactics, was left in disarray. This was no random rebellion. This was the result of years of preparation, of humans biding their time, waiting for the moment to strike. Back on Earth, humanity's leadership had risen from the shadows. The people, once silenced by the Council's decree, now found their voices. They had known this day would come, the day when their banishment would turn into a battle for survival. In secret, they had forged alliances with other outlying factions, pirates, and mercenaries who had long been neglected by the Council. These factions, once seen as nothing more than troublemakers, were now powerful allies in humanity's fight for freedom. A series of covert operations were launched from hidden human bases scattered across the galaxy. These bases, once thought abandoned, were now bustling hubs of activity, preparing for the final strike. Ships were repaired, weapons were tested, and fleets were formed, ready to retaliate against the Council's oppressive rule. The first major attack came when a key communication relay station, critical to the Council's coordination, was wiped out in a single strike. The humans had used their knowledge of the Council's infrastructure to identify vulnerabilities, and they had struck decisively. The station's destruction sent shockwaves throughout Council space, crippling their ability to communicate and organize. For the first time since the exile, the Council found themselves unable to control the narrative. Desperation set in among the Council's leaders. They had underestimated the humans, believing that their exile would break their spirit. But now, they faced an enemy that had not only survived but had learned to thrive in the shadows. The tide was turning, and the Council's once unshakable dominance was now in question. As the human forces pushed deeper into Council-controlled space, the galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity was no longer the weak, exiled race it had once been. They had learned from their past, adapted to their new reality, and were now showing the galaxy the true extent of their power. In the distance, the Council's fleet began to mobilize, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. But it was clear. Humanity had already won a critical battle. They had proven that even when banished, even when forgotten, they could strike back with a force that no one had ever imagined, and the galaxy would never be the same. They banished Earth's people, but humanity's fury had already spread. The Galactic Council's decision was final. Across the galaxy, alien species celebrated the exile of humanity. Earth, once a thriving cradle of civilization, was now a pariah, its people cast out for their history of conflict and perceived threat to galactic peace. The Council's decree was clear. Humanity was to be removed from the galactic community. On Earth, the news was met with a mixture of disbelief and defiance. Leaders stood silent, offering no resistance, as if they had anticipated this outcome. The silence was unsettling, raising questions among the populace and the Council alike. Why had Earth's leaders not protested? Had they accepted their fate, or was there something more at play? In the shadows of Earth's cities, a different narrative unfolded. Unbeknownst to the Council, a clandestine group had been preparing for this moment. They had anticipated the exile and had already set their plans into motion. A signal, encrypted and untraceable, was sent from a hidden facility on Earth, reaching deep into the farthest corners of the galaxy. The signal was not a plea for mercy or a call for help. It was a warning. At the edge of Council space, an anomaly was detected. A ship, unidentified and unregistered, had vanished without a trace. Sensors failed to capture its departure, and communications were silent. It was as if the ship had never existed. The Council dismissed the incident as a glitch, a minor anomaly in the vast expanse of space. But the disappearance was no accident. The ship, carrying the warning signal, had been sent to alert the galaxy of a force humanity had kept hidden for generations. A force that had been nurtured in secrecy, waiting for the day it would be needed. That day had arrived. The Council's celebration was premature. They believed they had rid the galaxy of humanity's influence, but in doing so, they had unknowingly set the stage for a reckoning. The damage had already been done. As the Council reveled in their perceived victory, the galaxy began to stir. Systems once thought secure reported strange occurrences, unexplained power surges, systems malfunctioning without cause, and communications intercepted with cryptic messages. The signs were subtle at first, easily dismissed as coincidences or technical failures. But they were not coincidences. Humanity's fury, long suppressed and hidden beneath layers of diplomacy and silence, was awakening. The exile had not broken their spirit, it had ignited a fire. The galaxy, in its arrogance, had underestimated the resilience and ingenuity of the human race. The Council's decision had set in motion a chain of events that could not be undone. The damage was already done. And now, the galaxy would learn that banishing humanity was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning. As the Council's decree echoed across the galaxy, the initial celebrations began to fade. The exiled humans, once seen as a threat, were now a distant memory. Or so it seemed. However, the galaxy was about to learn that underestimating humanity was a grave mistake. In the far reaches of Council space, anomalies began to surface. Unexplained power surges disrupted the smooth operations of various systems. Communications, once secure and predictable, started to intercept strange signals, encrypted messages that defied standard decoding methods. These weren't random glitches, they were deliberate, calculated disturbances. The Council, confident in their decision, dismissed these occurrences as mere coincidences. The humans are gone, they reassured themselves. Their influence has been erased. But deep within the shadows, a different story was unfolding. A clandestine group of humans, survivors of the exile, had anticipated this very moment. They had prepared for the day the galaxy would turn its back on them. And now, with the Council's decision, they saw an opportunity to act. Using their advanced knowledge and skills, they initiated a series of covert operations across Council space. One by one, alien colonies reported mysterious incidents. A research station in the Zeta system experienced a sudden and unexplained loss of data, erasing years of research in an instant. A military outpost in the Theta sector found its defense systems compromised, leaving it vulnerable to potential threats. A diplomatic envoy in the Lambda quadrant received a cryptic message. The fire spreads where you least expect it. These incidents, though seemingly isolated, were part of a larger, coordinated effort. The exiled humans had infiltrated key systems, planting seeds of disruption that would grow over time. Their message was clear. They had not been defeated, they had merely been underestimated. As the Council scrambled to address these anomalies, they found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't see, an adversary who operated from the shadows. Panic began to spread among the Council members. How had the humans managed to infiltrate their systems? How had they maintained such a presence without detection? The answer was simple. Humanity's greatest strength was its adaptability. Exiled. From the galaxy, they had learned to survive in isolation, honing their skills and strategies. Now, they were using that knowledge to turn the tables. The Council's initial complacency had given way to fear. They had believed that by banishing humanity, they had secured peace. Instead, they had ignited a spark that was quickly turning into a blaze. And so, the galaxy stood on the brink of a new conflict, one that had been set in motion by the very decision to exile humanity. The Council had underestimated their adversary, and now they would face the consequences.